Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate Judiciary Committee should not be a theater for mischaracterizing or twisting nominees' records or views, nor should it be an avenue for persecution. You know, we've seen a growing pattern among Senate Democrats of hostility to religious faith. I have to say I was deeply troubled a few minutes ago to hear questioning of a nominee asking your personal views on what is sinful. In my view, that has no business in this committee. Article 6 of the Constitution says there should be no religious test for any public office. We have also seen Senate Democrats attack what they've characterized as religious dogma. We've seen Senate Democrats attack nominees for their own personal views on salvation. I don't believe this is a theological court of inquisition. I think the proper avenue for investigation of this committee is a nominee's record. So, Ms. Rao, let me talk about your record, and let me ask you about your actual record, which is what this committee should be looking at, not our own personal religious views or your religious views, whatever they may be. You shared at your confirmation hearing your family story about how your parents left India, arrived in Detroit in the middle of a snowstorm, without winter jackets and with just $16 and the optimism of the recently married. That is a story that resonates with me. It has similarities to my own father's story. Can you share with this committee a bit of your family story and how that has impacted your life journey?
Sure. My parents, as I said, came from India in the early 70s, and they had their medical degrees, and they, had residencies and fellowships. They worked really hard for not very much pay. I was born in 1973 when my parents still didn't have very much, but I had a really happy childhood. My parents were warm and loving, and I grew up with many warm and loving family friends. And I think they conveyed many of the values that they brought with them, about hard work and honesty, and that has been a big part of shaping who I am today.
Much of the questioning from this committee has also focused on your college writings, and there has been language and characterizations that I think are false and distorting. So I want anyone listening at home to be unequivocally clear. When it comes to sexual assault and rape, both are wrong, are evil, are criminal, and should be prosecuted. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
As I sat here listening to the questioning and what was being described by Democratic members, I thought, what crazy thing must she have written in college? And I pulled out and read it sitting here. And I read, for example, in one of the articles entitled Shades of Gray, that you wrote, clearly, if the male student forced the woman to have sex against her will, then he should be held responsible. You also said a man who rapes a drunk girl should be prosecuted. Now, both of those statements are unequivocally true, correct, and you said them then. What is causing Democratic umbrage is you also said that college students should refrain from drinking to excess. Now, I would note that is very good advice for a college student, whether male or female. I have two daughters. Now, fortunately, they're 8 and 10. We're not dealing with this yet, but I certainly intend to give them the advice not to drink to excess. And it is unquestionably true that any college student that drinks to the point of getting drunk and losing control risks being a victim, risks being vulnerable. When I was a student in college, I recall a student who was there with me who drank to excess and then tragically got on top of a train and electrocuted himself, lost 3 of his limbs. It was horrific, and so that is very good advice for a college student. Don't drink to the point of losing self-control. And I just want anyone watching this to be clear that you were unequivocal then and unequivocal now that anyone who commits a crime of sexual violence should be prosecuted. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The D.C. Circuit's caseload involves a great deal of administrative law questions, often very complicated administrative law questions. What in your professional background do you believe has prepared you to be a D.C. Circuit judge?
Yes, thank you, Senator Cruz. I believe that much of my practical and academic experience relates very closely to the specialized docket of the D.C. Circuit. As has been mentioned, I've worked in all three branches of the federal government. I'm currently the administrator of OIRA, where I oversee regulatory policy from different executive branch agencies and look closely at whether those regulations are consistent with law and whether they meet certain analytical standards. And as a scholar for over a decade, I've been writing about these types of issues and constitutional law and administrative law, separation of powers.
Let me ask one final question, just because I'm at the end of my time. Why, in your judgment, does separation of powers and federalism matter? Why should the people care about separation of power and federalism, two important structural restraints in our Constitution?
I think those structural restraints are essential to the protection of individual liberty, and our founders created that structure to protect individuals from government overreaching and tyranny.
Thank you.